Hello, everybody. Welcome to 3-Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
I'm Samantha Cotterill.
And I'm Anthony Wheeler. All three of us are professional illustrators, and for the last 25 years, we've worked with all the major publishers and publications in the business, published over 50 children's books, and have all taught illustration at the university level.
Each week, we tackle a subject related to illustration from three perspectives. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we argue, but every time you learn something brand spanking new.
All right. That was flawless. You guys really got this down.
Perfection.
We had talked about different topics over the weeks as we've been communicating about this podcast. And one of them kept coming up and I kept thinking about it. This is one that Sam brought up, and that was sort of, I guess the way I'm calling it is sort of like productivity, ways that you can be more productive and work as a creative person while also being, what'd you call it? Have lower executive function than normal people, I would say.
Executive dysfunction compared to
yes. Yeah. And what I mean by that is a lot of creative types, I would say, whether diagnosed or not, have some form of ADHD, some sort of attention deficit type of thing, which is in some ways a superpower, but it's also this liability at times too. And I know both of you are diagnosed.
Yep, at 19 I was.
At 19.
At 44.
And Anthony at 44. Yeah. And I was diagnosed by my wife several years ago.
And then re-diagnosed every time we talk, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I, over the years, have come up with a bunch of strategies, coping strategies, and like systems and productivity. I guess systems really is the best word. Just things that I do to stay on top of all the projects that I've going on. And many people have commented on my lists and my systems and things like that, and have said there's no way that this kind of stuff comes from a person who has that. But I actually think I overcompensate for it because I cannot function. I've had things really go sideways because I was being forgetful and just stupid about things, right? And there's sometimes, I've gotten to the point though now where I can manage several projects at the same time. There's things I don't forget, which I used to forget all the time. I mean, have you guys ever missed a flight?
I don't fly because I'm scared to fly. So no, I don't have that problem.
I've missed 2 flights in my life. You'd think you'd learn your lesson after the first one, but no. It took me a second missed flight.
I have enough anxiety that I haven't missed a flight yet. I've never picked up a kid late from school ever.
No, I'm always the one that shows up 20 minutes early to everything.
Yeah,
and then I circle the block.
Like
I circle the block until I can actually show up to the driveway because I over worry. Yeah.
So you pair your anxiety with the ADHD, and see, I don't have anxiety. And so I'm like, what's ever the opposite of anxiety? Like, everything's going to be fine.
Malaise. I don't know what is the opposite of anxiety.
I don't know. I think I do have a thing called time blindness, which I think is one of the symptoms, right?
Yep. You've met one ADHD person. You've met one ADHD person. I mean, everybody has their own things, and time blindness for sure.
Right.
Yeah, it's the constellation of stuff, and everyone's constellation looks just a little different.
Right.
Yep.
So what I thought we'd do is we'd dig down into our tips, our coping mechanisms, our productivity tips, things like that, and see if we can't offer some help for people like 25-year-old Jake who needed to hear this stuff and didn't know about it. So does that sound good?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay. So what I thought I'd do is let's each share a tip. We'll just kind of do a round, and then if you run out of tips, we'll just keep going until all the tips are done. Does that sound good?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah.
And then
Can I
Sam,
just
did you?
change it a little bit though? Because you've got me thinking about something that I really want to say.
Well, why don't we start with you? Why don't you say
Okay.
that thing you want to say?
Okay, just because when you just said to speak to my 25-year-old Jake,
Mm,
I think I want to turn that to the audience and look
Yeah.
directly at the audience, because I know there are so many creatives out there that are in their mid-20s, early 20s, that are maybe struggling so much with this executive dysfunction and being able to get projects started. And I think the toughest thing as someone with a neurodiverse brain can be this idea of wanting to start a project so badly, but you can't start. And the stigma that comes from that, from people around you that maybe don't quite get it and think of it as a laziness issue or a just do it. Like if you want to start it, then just start it. And
Yeah, just do. Just
not,
go outside. Just do a thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
and not fully understanding that it's like you're standing on the edge of a cliff and there's what you want on the other side, but there's this huge, huge cannon facing you and you can't make that first step and you want to be there so badly. And just that there are so many parts of the executive dysfunction in your brain that control starting tasks, initiating things, shifting from one task to another, resisting impulsivity, all of that. But those things don't even fully develop in your brain until you're mid 20s, 25. And then for those with ADHD, it's even later. So you could be 28 and still struggling with that aspect of your brain. So I just want you to know that it does get easier when you get older. You have a sense of awareness of kind of how your brain works. You start to figure out and explore tips and tricks to kind of maybe help you kind of build that bridge to get to where you want to go, but it does get easier. It doesn't end. I mean, I'm still, as I know, talking to you guys, we're always talking about calendars, things that you're trying to get. You're always going to have that, but managing it is going to get easier. So I wanted to just say that to all the young creatives that are just maybe really struggling and thinking it's something that's a fault or something and it's not. And it does get easier. So
I appreciate that.
There you
That's
go.
good.
Yeah, my wife calls that giving grace, and I don't think that's something that I think enough of us do, or society lets sort of happen sometimes. She also talks a lot about sort of the seasons of our lives. Like sometimes you are just in a season of your life where things are more difficult or more anxious or more time consuming, or
yeah,
just like you simply just don't have the energy. And that's where that giving grace notion sort of comes from. Like sometimes it just isn't it. And you have to sort of recognize that. I have a friend, a good friend, who had a baby a couple of years ago, and she had other children. She's just a wonderful person, and she's a really creative soul. She just couldn't get to the creating because she had a toddler. She had a baby. She couldn't. In addition to being a mom and a wife, she couldn't do, and having a job, she just couldn't do those things. And so that was that season of her life. And after about a year and a half, like she was able to come back and be productive
Yeah.
again. But
yeah, we all
it's
have those
tough.
right now moments. I mean,
Yeah.
right now moments can be a day. Right now moment can last for a few years, but they're right now moments. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that's just important to address, because I know there's probably a lot of artists watching this that are maybe really struggling with that. And, I hear
Cool.
you.
I appreciate that. That's good. We oftentimes I'll read in the comments that they'll say like me, Will, and Lee are like their art dads or their art uncles. And I think today we've got the art mom in the house, who's giving
What does
you
that make me?
motherly
Like the
advice.
creepy art uncle?
You're the weird uncle.
Yeah, I'm definitely the weird uncle in this one.
Yeah, who we only see at Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah, which is a good thing.
Right. All right. So my first tip that I want to give you guys, and this one is, you know what? As I was thinking about it, my first tip has another component to it that could be its own tip. And so I'm going to combine these two. And that is an accountability partner
Oh,
combined.
you took it.
Oh, shoot.
That's okay. That's
Okay.
good.
An
That's a good
accountability
sign.
partner combined with an MIT. And an MIT stands for most important task. Most important task. And every morning or the night before, you identify that day's most important task.
Yeah.
That if nothing else happens, at least you got that thing done.
Yeah.
And you can be proud of yourself for and feel accomplished because you got that one thing done. And other things can go by the wayside, things can go haywire, but you showed up and you delivered that most important task. And then share it with your accountability partner so that the way it works with me and my friend is every morning we text each other, MIT, whatever, MIT this, MIT that. And then at the end of the day, we check back in and it's either accomplished, partial, or failure. And then we'll tell why we failed or why it was partial or whatever. And that has done wonders for my productivity because I have a person who is going to be hearing whether I did it or not. I have something that I could focus on where if I lose my way, I'd be like, oh, wait, what's my MIT? Oh, yeah, I got to finish that. And then I can move on to other things. Or I got to get this stuff out of the way so I can get to this MIT and really focus on it. And it just has helped me completely. I wouldn't say it's like transformed everything, but it really has helped me dial in my daily productivity.
And I think if you're doing the accountability partner, which is one of my tips too, it's important to also be careful with who you choose to be your accountability partner. I think family members can be great. The only problem there is that you kind of know that if you don't do it, they're still going to be okay with you and be like, oh, so I have to up the ante, especially when I don't have a deadline. And that is kind of what I reminded myself of what I went through when I finished this prior book and I went into this period of free time where I had this idea, which I should have known, looking back at it, that I'm going to get all this stuff done. I've got 3 months I've given myself to just, and what happens? Nothing gets done because task paralysis takes over and I don't start anything. And I had no defined deadline to kind of get me going. For the accountability partner, for me, what helps when you don't have a specific deadline, let's say you're trying to explore something new in your work, I have to up the ante. So I have to either, if it's with a family member, because most often it usually is with someone close to you, I have to offer something that's going to hurt me a little bit to make me meet that deadline. And even with my agent, I've said I'm going to pay her $20 if I don't deliver my sketches. And I'm not saying that you have to fork out $20. It could even be something where you're lending something to someone that they are not allowed to give back to you until you finish that task. Little things that you can do that just make it more assured that you're going to do what you say you're going to do with your accountability partner. And that's for when I'm in those extreme cases where you're really struggling to get something done. But I do think, like you said, Jake, I've done that all the time. I'll start my day and tell somebody my plans for that day. And then that person will check in with me and just see where I am with it. And I want to make them proud. So that will encourage me to get things done.
Yeah. Isn't it kind of funny that how consistent I think all three of us are sort of in that category? Like my tip was, my first tip is I write my list down before I go to bed because it then gets all those thoughts out. I get them on paper. I know when I wake up, I can get like what's on my list. And then for me, it's tackling the hardest thing first. If just like you, Sam, like I have that paralysis, and if something sort of lingers and waits, and then if I don't do it, then it mounts, and then I get hit by the time constraint. Oh, it is too much.
Which
So I
is
always try to
interesting because I have to do an easy thing first. I need something
to get your
to give
momentum.
me that dopamine of like, okay, check. And then I need to do a couple easy ones that I know are doable before I tackle a larger one.
Yeah.
But that's all about figuring out your own routine of what works best for you.
Yeah.
That's cool. Do you have an accountability partner, Anthony?
Well, for this last, year and a half, I've had a person really close to me, working with me, and
Mhm.
she does not care about my excuses.
Right.
And so like that's been great.
Yeah.
It's been really great, and there's a lot of accountability there. Beyond that, I spend an awful lot of money with this great group of people to do marketing and strategy and
Yeah.
execution and ads and things like that. And I'm reading my Slack channel right now. Like, there's a lot of accountability there, and so
Uh-huh.
for me, I think having that kind of, this is a new term that came up for me in the last couple of months, but it's that concept of body doubling, which is where I can work alongside another person and maybe even not talk or communicate, but just knowing that I'm sort of like moving down this tunnel with that person
Mhm.
makes those tasks easier for me.
Mhm.
Um,
And
and
that's,
that's
oh,
what
go
those
ahead.
people have been for me. Yeah, go ahead.
And that's interesting because I explored that avenue as well. And I had recently learned that there's a lot of these websites where you can go and just almost be in a adult focus room where you're around other people that are also working, and you're not necessarily talking with them, but they're visually in the space working on their own stuff. Or there's YouTube videos where there's artists that are just working at their desk. That was the worst idea for me because all I kept doing was wanting to check and see what they were doing. And I kept turning to the screen being like, oh, what are they drawing? Oh, what are they doing? And then what are they doing
That's so
now? What are
funny.
they doing now? I definitely had to figure out what I needed to do for my own atmosphere of space. And
Uh-huh.
having a body double is great if they're maybe divided in a different room, but I get distracted even so easily with that. So
Which is
it's
so
just,
funny, right? And that's that whole constellation thing. Like, what works for me doesn't work for you.
Right.
It's like Jake and I ended up on a phone call last week or earlier this week. I don't know what time is. And he knocked out like a page. I edited a video, and I I inked a full thing. And it just like within an hour got all these things done that I just would have never gotten done.
Yep.
yeah,
It's just weird. It's just
yeah.
weird.
Yeah. Have you guys heard of Cave Day?
Mm-mm.
Of
So
what was
Cave
that?
Day,
Sorry.
caveday.org.
Mm-mm.
It's a website. It's a community website where essentially, if I got this right, they, their thing is focus, structure, fun, celebrate progress, and get things done. Work feels better in the cave. And so essentially, what it is everybody sets a time. They have certain times throughout the week where you all log on at the same time, and then you just say, "Here's what I'm working on," and then everybody gets to work while it's live streaming. And nobody, if you have to take a call, you mute so nobody's distracted. But essentially, you're working with other people, and you're less likely to screw around knowing that there's other people that could see you working or whatnot, I guess. Anyways, I don't know if that's your nightmare or if that's gonna help you or
Not for
not,
me.
but
Yeah, I think that would be my
it's a
nightmare.
thing. It's definitely a thing.
Yeah, it'd be my nightmare.
Well, Lee recently put himself into a situation where he can go into a shared office space with a whole bunch of different people, different industries,
Mhm.
different everything, just so he could have a little time away from the house where all the distractions are, and be
Yeah.
able to go to a place with a lot of just movement, commotion, energy, and then just which helps him focus.
Mhm.
Again, it's just everything just is different for everybody. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. All right. Next tip. Did you want to do yours, Sam?
Yeah. I think, let's see, we just discussed accountability to a partner. I think breaking your well, what I do, let me see. Okay, here, why don't I just share? So what I do, this is way more organized than it normally is. So I think for me, I tend to have this paranoia with planners, especially when I buy planners all the time, where I'll be like,
Mhm.
this one's got all the bells and whistles. I'm gonna buy this one. Even Jake's planner, I bought that one right away. I printed it all out. I put it in a binder. I probably spent way too long doing the cover and making it all fancy. And then I opened it up and then nothing has been put in it. And it's only
Oh, man.
because, no offense, Jake, but we're just so different in that I
Right.
appreciated it because I thought, wow, this is amazing. There's
Mhm.
so much time allotted for everything.
Yeah.
And at first I felt overwhelmed because I thought, if I put stuff in here, is it only going to show me what I don't get done? And I almost
Oh.
became paralyzed and was scared to use it because I
Mhm.
worried that it would show what I don't do and what I don't get done. So I think it meant taking your planner and the
Mhm.
idea of it and realizing what can I take from there that works better for me. And having things broken down all into time sections was a bit too overwhelming. It scared
Mhm.
me a little bit and it made me nervous of if something comes up or if this one task doesn't go within the time range that I put it on, am I going to be able to cope? So I do much better in a simplified version where it's basically just the calendars like this, where they're not divided all into times and where I can just basically do lists and cross them off as I go.
Yeah.
The bigger things I'll put on bigger Post-its. The small tasks I can put on tiny ones. And if something doesn't get done that day, I can peel it off and move it to another day.
I like that.
And as I'm working, if I get distracted, which happens like all the time while I'm working, ideas come in, I always make sure I have little Post-its or something that I can write it down the minute it comes into my brain and just put it on the top, just so I know it's not going to get forgotten.
Mhm.
And I might even put the things I forgot about that I suddenly remembered. I'm like, oh my God, I totally forgot this is coming up. I'll quickly put it there. And then I can kind of look at the week and go, where can I fit it in?
Yeah.
To give myself even more rewards when I do it, which you can see I haven't done it yet this week. I just, crossing stuff off visually always helps, but sometimes it's
Mhm.
fun to just take what you've done and put it in a little section where you've done everything.
Yeah.
And then when you look back at it, you realize you've done way more than you think that you've done, which can also be a little bit of a boost. So I think it's just taking the idea of schedules and planners. I think they're important, but it's what kind works best for you. I think you need to give it a good week to try it out,
Mhm.
adapt it. But I would say my biggest tip with that is to first figure out how long tasks take you, because they always take way longer than you anticipate. And I don't think we've ever really explored first maybe spending a week of recording how long things take.
Mhm.
And then when you go into the schedule phase, you kind of have a better idea of, in general, how long things can take. So emails, you can always say, I mean, I look at my husband, it's like, I'll just write this quick email, but it's never a quick email. It takes him like 30 minutes to do one email. But
Yeah.
in his brain, he's always thinking, I'm just going to knock that out in 5 minutes. When
Right.
in reality, it's never been 5 minutes. So you start to gain a sense of, wow, this always takes way longer than I think. So that way, when you're creating a schedule, you're a bit more realistic with how much you can tolerate, like how much you can do in one day versus
Mhm.
your ideal of what you think you can get done in a day.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then
Mhm.
before, to loop that in with this, another thing is people don't think about the transitions. So you
Right.
may decide that you're going to be, I like every morning when I get up, I have to resist looking at a phone, because to me, if I look at a phone right when I wake up, it just puts doom and sets
Mhm.
in a negative tone. And it's 1 hour. I really don't need to be privy to everything for that first
Right.
hour. Oh my God, I just got distracted in my thought. I was going somewhere and then I started.
Press the eject button. Unacceptable, especially during this conversation about
Oh,
productivity.
this is it, which is even funnier, transitions. So anyway, factoring in how long those transitions are, especially for neurotypical people versus neurodiverse, it takes longer for me to go from point A to point B than it might be for my husband. He might say, after lunch, I'm going to do this. Well, that transition time between lunch and getting out my journal or whatever it is may take me a little bit longer. So
Mhm.
there needs to be some awareness that you do need to give yourself a little bit of grace in between each task that you're assigning yourself, because there is that transition period in between.
I like that. I call it the time audit. You got to give yourself a time audit. And I usually, my advice is don't just do a week, but take like an entire month, because every week's a little bit different, but months kind of look the same, right? And just record how long, every 15 minutes, kind of go back and just, okay, I finished the thing. I checked when I started it. This is when I finished it. I'm starting a new task. I'm shifting between, and even that's really painful, but you even need to like keep track of how much time you scroll through Instagram or, Twitter or whatever, and pay attention to all that stuff. Mark when you go to bed, mark when you wake up, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because it really is gonna help you the following month when you start doing the time blocking, like planning out how this week's gonna go. You have a much more realistic idea of
Yeah.
like,
And then
oh,
just even setting the scene for
mhm,
creating a situation where you get things done. Like for
mhm.
me, when I wake up, except for my podcast days when I put on a fancy sweater, I wake up every morning and I put I have to go for a big walk in the morning because it just helps
Uh-huh.
my dopamine kind of get going. But
Yeah.
regardless, I always put my workout clothes on when I wake up, because I know that when I go for my run at 4,
Mhm.
the task of going upstairs to change is too overwhelming for me so many times. And I know that that will be my excuse to not go and run, because I'll go,
Yeah.
oh, that means I actually have to take off pants and put other pants on. That's asking a lot.
Which is the
Um,
thing you're good at, right? Like those are quick tasks. You've done it a trillion times, but it can still be paralyzing.
Well, and like I'm a very open book. I'm very honest, and I will say like simple tasks for me, or tough tasks for me, are often very simple for others.
Mhm.
Taking showers. I don't like taking showers. I don't like the thought of taking a shower. I don't like the feeling. I don't like the whole transition process. So how do I get through my day and get my morning routine the quickest and smoothest way as possible? As I take a bath at night, and then I might lean over the sink in the morning and wash my hair in the sink when it's
Oh,
absolutely necessary. But by
right.
eliminating the stress of this shower thing,
Uh-huh.
then it makes my mornings run a bit more smoothly. I mean,
Yeah.
you just look up ADHD and not wanting to take a shower. It's probably all over Reddit. So I'm part of that club. But it's just you figure out ways to make your days easier in that sense. I use the same mug, which signifies to my brain that that's my work mug. So I have a certain mug that I like to make my coffee in. Just little habits that I associate with work. I use cheesy kind of like coffee jazz YouTube music, where it's like a
Mhm.
little digital coffee setting, and it's just got the music that's at a frequency that helps me stay focused. And I use the Pomodoro method in my own way all the time, because I know that distractions are going to flood in when I'm starting to tackle a task that I cannot be distracted by. So, even if I do like a 10-minute timer,
Mhm.
then I'm saying I have to do this particular task in 10 minutes, or see what I can get done in 10 minutes. Things are going to start coming in and trying to like poke the bear and be like, yeah, do you really want to do that? There's something else better. Here's something
Mhm.
shiny. And then I can say, well, timer's not dinging yet. Let me put that down on a piece of paper. And then when
Yeah.
that timer's done, then I can decide if it's something I can add into my day or move it somewhere else. So
Yeah. That was like 5 tips in one,
I
but
realized I was
we'll
just going off.
we'll
So
take
Well,
it.
did you say one of your tips was that you were going to give a lot of tips all at the same time, just to
what
be
my
more
tip was
efficient and productive?
my tip was going to be simplify, which clearly is not what happened.
No, that's good. Actually, Pomodoro timer was on my one of my tips as well. So I appreciate you like digging
Yeah.
into that. And essentially, you could use your phone. You can, as I think when you buy or you acquire a very specific object with a specific task to it, it gives that a little bit more gravitas, and you're more likely to use it. So like I don't want to use my phone as a timer because my phone has so many strings attached to it. And as soon as I go to like set the timer, pretty soon I'm like 20 minutes into watching reels or whatever. And so I try to stay away from my phone as much as possible, which is why I got this little guy here, which is a Pomodoro timer. You just push a button and it starts counting down, and you can
Yeah.
reset it however you want. It's got 2 timers on it, and it's been great. Like,
And it's funny because I have to use a different kind of timer. So this is where you kind of go with what works for you. Because for me, that is amazing, but all I would do is keep looking and see where the number is on that timer going down. And that would be probably most of my time spent. Where is it now? Where is it at now? So I have a timer that I used when the kids were little, that it's just colors. So you can set the colors. So basically it's a green light. And then when it's approaching 5 minutes before the timer's up, it turns yellow. And then when time's up, it turns red. So that way I'm not distracted by looking at where the number is at, but I can say, oh, it's still green. Okay, and then I know in my mind that yellow time it's getting
better start
closer.
wrapping
And
things
then
up.
it keeps me on task without keeping me distracted throughout trying to not be distracted.
That's cool.
That's awesome. I was going to talk about routine. I think this whole conversation is distilled down into routines that are productive and helpful for us. Every day at 3:00, I have a hard stop where I set up, and I'm super accountable to a group of people that I live stream for. And one of the things that has freaked me out over the last 3 years that I've been doing this is that if I like to be really well prepared for that, because there's a lot of interaction, there's a lot of chat messages, it's just a lot to manage. And so if I get down to the end of my block of time before my 3 p.m. and I don't have the pieces of art that I want to work on, if I don't have just the thoughts collected in my head, if I don't know what that schedule is going to be for those 3 hours that I'm live streaming, I flail. It's like I'm drowning in the pool, just like, help. So what I have found for me, and again, this is just maybe, I don't know if it's a coping mechanism or what, when I get up, just like Sam, I try to get my morning walk out as fast as possible. Like for me, it just rejuvenates me. I try to get that hardest thing done really quickly. And then I use that sort of momentum and energy to be creative, and to be as creative as early as I can. And luckily, if I do enough of the hard things in succession, there's very few really hard things. It goes from filing taxes, which is a hard thing, to sending a friend an email. And, it's like the time, if you're always doing the hard thing, for me, then those are really minimal. And then having that block of time between like 9:30 to sort of lunchtime, where I've inked, I've painted, I've done the creative thing. And then the other thing that I've noticed then, and I didn't realize that this was sort of a feature of what I struggle with, is that the closer I get to a deadline is the more paralyzed that I can become. And that I struggle doing almost anything. It's almost like when I have to get ready to go to the airport, I can't do anything for 2 hours beforehand, because it's just my body and my brain just won't let me do that. So what I have found, if I can get the hard thing done, be creative in that block of time before lunch, then I can do all of the tactical stuff, the shipping, sending the rest of the emails, all of the little things that are very like check. That stuff is so good for me before I've got that hard stop at 3 p.m. To then live stream. And then I've really made sure that live stream time for me is ultra creative time. And it's also time where I get human interaction. So that's almost like the reward for doing all of those steps right there. And if it all works in concert, it's just a good day. It's just a really good day.
Yeah.
So
Cool. All right. I have another sort of, I guess, mechanism or a thought way to think about things. And that's learning the difference between important and urgent. And a lot of times you might be so caught up doing what is urgent that you neglect the important. And the way that I sort of divide those two things is the important stuff are the things that you're really going to regret not doing. And it might be something that a month from now or years from now, you wish you had gotten going on. So they're going to be things like relationships with others, your health of your body, right? Career stuff that you never got around to doing. It could be as simple as I wish I'd planted a tree 20 years ago in that spot, because it sure would be nice to have that tree now, like, and that's one way to look at it. The really important stuff never is super urgent. And so that's why it always gets put on the back burner. And the urgent stuff, you have to really divide, like kind of assess, is this urgent and important, or is this urgent and unimportant? And oftentimes we get caught up into these urgent things like, holy cow, I got 25 text messages. People all need something. So I better take time out to like answer all these text messages. And so you're sitting there and 30, 45 minutes into texting back everybody about stuff that maybe didn't need to be answered right then. And you've neglected the important work that had to happen. You skipped a workout that day, or you skipped drawing in your sketchbook that day, or you skipped, finishing a particular project, hitting a deadline for that day that then you're going to have to pay back later. So
And I think it's good to ask yourself too, in that moment, are you doing that because you're avoiding the stuff that you need to get done you don't want to do? Like, is this a distraction tactic that you're finding yourself putting a lot of attention on this because it's a way of avoiding the thing that you don't want to do? Like make appointments.
Right, exactly. So
go to the mailbox. That's mine.
Go to the mailbox. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's also good just to, when you're struggling to do those things, to try to put visually. I'm a visual person, so I think I have to visualize everything. But if in my mind I keep thinking about, when I've finished this task, how do I usually feel when I've done it? And it usually feels really good, and I have to kind of replay that scenario in my mind when I'm planning on putting something off, or thinking, oh, I'll just do this other thing instead. And that's like, wait a second. Remember, how do you feel when you've gotten that thing done? And it might be worth the little bit of headache to maybe just count down from 5 and make yourself go and do it. And then you'll feel really good. And it opens up the mind and the space to be able to then maybe go on and do the things that you want to do.
Cool. So have you heard of an Eisenhower matrix? It's like it's essentially, you have a cross, and on one side you have two extremes, on the north and the south and the east and the west of this like cross, right? And for this particular thing, there's going to be urgent, not urgent, important, not important. And what that makes is 4 quadrants. And there's a important but not urgent quadrant. There's an urgent and important quadrant. There's a not urgent, not important quadrant. And there's a not important but urgent quadrant. Did I get them all right? Or did I repeat one? Anyways, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't have the visual, so I'm losing it.
I know. Huh? So essentially, once you have that sort of thing set down, you can go look at your, that time audit that you did, and take all the things like, okay, I did laundry on this day, and that took an hour. I did, I prepared meals on this day, and that took, a couple hours or whatever. I spent time working on this comic page, and that took 3 hours or whatever. And so you take all these time audit stuff that you've done, and you start plugging them in. Was this important, or was it urgent? Was it, where on it? Was it highly urgent or kind of urgent? And that kind of gives you a good assessment of where your focus is and how you're thinking about stuff, so that as you move forward and you're blocking out time blocking for your week or whatever, you can really prioritize the non-urgent important stuff, because that's the stuff that really gets neglected. Your brain falls back on, really like succumbs to urgent non-important stuff and not important not urgent stuff. So I think like scrolling through YouTube shorts or whatever, each platform has their like short video stuff, which are highly addictive, highly dopamine effective, right?
Oh, yeah.
Completely
Absolutely.
not important, completely non-urgent, but your brain loves it.
And that is
And
why it was the hardest thing in a way for me. I know that it's probably maybe been difficult for the job in some elements of not being on social media, but
Mhm.
what I can handle, it is too addictive for me. I cannot exist
Yeah.
with that temptation of just, I am that person that will
Mhm.
then start to then all of a sudden realize an hour has gone by
Mhm.
and I feel miserable after. And it's just too much of an interference for me to be able to get the work done that I need to get done. So I have to find another way. There's other
Right.
doors, there's other ways to do it. And I'm figuring that out. And
Going back to our first interview with you, I love that one of your tactics was subscribing to magazines. And
yeah, I love that. And my new one is the library now. I was like,
mm,
why did I not go to the city library more? Because I
mhm.
can go to different sections. And even yesterday, I was just looking at architectural painting books. It's
Yeah.
a date. I give myself a date every
Mhm.
week where I go to the coffee shop, I'm around people, and I grab a book first from the library that's in a subject that's completely different. Um, and then I walk around and I get fed that way. But yes,
Right.
magazines have been a beautiful way to be able to see work that doesn't get fed to me within a specific thing based on what I've been.
And there's something like, I remember being a kid and getting subscriptions to magazines, because that was really the only way I could get access to visual stimulation outside of like television, right?
Yeah.
And my mom didn't let us have video game machines, and bless her heart for that, because I would have really gone deep
Did you
on
call it
that
a
as
video
well.
game machine?
Yeah. Wow.
That
What?
says a lot.
That's the least in touch you've ever been.
That's like me
Now
when
you
I
know
said I
that
used to
really
call
came from a true
collect.
place. You kids and your video game machines.
I was the Frogger master. I was the Frogger master.
But
And Centipede.
I remember like mail day, when my magazine would come in the mail, and I would just be like, oh my gosh. It was the first magazine subscription I ever got was Muppet Magazine, which
Oh,
absolutely is the best magazine ever. I don't know if they still make it or what, but it was essentially like People Magazine mixed with like Time Magazine maybe, but it's all Muppets content. And so the cover
oh,
would be,
I would have been in heaven.
yeah, and they always come with a poster. So my wall had like Muppet posters all over it. Anyway, and I just pour over that magazine, and then I shifted to Automobile Magazine because I was way into cars. So always, just learning about exotic, Italian sports cars, and then figuring out what's the best, sedan for my buck as well. Anyways, so I love that sort of cadence of, and the National Geographic was another mainstay over the years, of getting a thing in the mail, sort of having a date with that thing, going through it, reading an article, putting it down, coming back to it again. And what you're doing is you're going deep on something, on one thing, instead of going shallow on 100 things, which is, I feel like, what social media has trained us to do.
Yeah. And it's so
So,
tactile too.
mhm,
It's the tactilness of that is so
yeah.
important. And
Yeah.
it just brings you into the moment.
The library thing's good too. I haven't been to the library lately because I work at home, and I never leave, and it's out of my way. So I need to like follow your example and just set a
do
date
it.
for
I
it.
mean, it's the same way. I went yesterday for the first time, and I basically went in, and it's only 5 minutes away, and
Mhm.
I realized, why, my gosh, I've had this at my disposal, but
Yeah, they're
it's
wonderful.
also just life. I mean, you have to
Yeah,
give yourself a little bit of it's life. I mean, I'm now at a place where both kids are in college.
yeah.
There's more freedom to
Mhm,
kind of have my days go. It's different. It's different. So I'm trying to
mhm.
hone in on that. But at least I do think a library is something that's accessible to everybody to take some time and just go, and the collections that are there, it just feeds you,
Yeah.
and check
When
out
I
one book.
when I worked in animation, I literally drove past the Greenwich Public Library on the way to Blue Sky. And one day I was just like, let's check it out. And so I went to the library. I was late for work, but I counted it as work because I was feeding myself creativity.
Yeah,
And
it
uh,
is.
and then I started making that a habit. So I probably went to the library once a week that way and was just late for
Yeah,
work
it's
those days.
important, but it is
Yeah.
part of your feeding that artistic. There's a little buddy in there that
Mhm.
I'll call mine Fred. I got to entertain Fred. I have to feed Fred. Fred gets hungry. I can't ignore it. I've got to feed him. He needs a good
Right.
snack. So the library is a good way to feed Fred. So
And there's I would call it a natural algorithm when you walk into the library where
yeah,
you're letting sort of interests naturally guide you. So there's certain sections of the library where I'm drawn to. So it's going to be the graphic novels or
yeah,
the big art books. But to get to them, you got to walk past the architect section, or you got to walk past the gardening section,
yeah.
or there's all these different sections you're walking past, and something's going to catch your eye. You're
Yeah,
gonna be like,
and
what's
it's also a
this?
collection of books from a long time ago all the way to
You're right.
present, versus a bookstore where you're all of a sudden going, oh, your eyes have, and then the setting itself. If you are, I'm trying to be much more present and aware and just observing,
Uh-huh.
because in order to be able to creatively represent something that has life, I have to be part of it. And even just being in the library and watching the people reading and studying and listening, kind of not like
Uh-huh.
eavesdropping, but like overhearing
Right.
conversations. You're doing more than just scrolling on your phone and getting hyper focused and seeing, like, that you're experiencing a totality of senses that are feeding Fred, for my
Right.
case, but are
Yeah.
feeding you. And in no doubt part of the process in terms of continued work and creation. And it's important to be aware of that.
I think Sam just wrote a picture book right now just about Fred and sort
Oh,
of
Fred.
and feeding Fred with books.
Right.
I think you have something. Also, Jake, I realize why you don't go to the library, especially like over the summer. It's because 150 degrees where you live.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to go outside, and they're not
Mhm.
open at 4 a.m. when it's finally cool.
I know the library needs to extend their hours during the summer because they close way too early. They open way too late. I love how this is, this podcast starts out as productivity, get your stuff done, and it ends with just spend time in the library, just follow your bliss.
just smelling the flowers.
I
out in
have
the
another
fields.
tip, and I call it the Hemingway. And this
So we got
is,
an Eisenhower, so now we're getting the
yeah,
Hemingway.
now we're getting the Hemingway.
Okay.
Hemingway, obviously, great American 20th century writer. And one of his tricks was, and he was very productive, always got his writing done, right? Um, but one of his tricks was at the end of every day, he wouldn't work to a stopping point where I'm like, oh, I just got to finish this paragraph. He would stop mid sentence. And the reason for that is the next day when he sat down, he knew what that sentence was gonna end like, and so he didn't have to like context shift and realize like, okay, where was I and where was I going with this? He could just sit down and be like, finish the sentence, and that sentence leads into the next sentence, and now he's writing and he's
Yeah.
on his way.
And I think
so,
that's brilliant. I do that as well. But you go on and I'll finish my little.
well, I was
I'll
just gonna
join.
say the how that applies to artists is maybe you finish your piece, whatever you're working on for that day, and you start the next one and just get a sketch on the page or something like that. Or if it's a comic page, you start one panel, so you already have a panel done or something like that. So when you sit down to it, you can just jump right into it and not be
that's so funny.
paralyzed with starting something.
I think there's a key though for that, because for me, it has to be what I do is if something's going really well and I'm loving it, I will force myself to stop early so that I'm excited when I wake up to finish it. But if it's something that I'm not loving or I'm struggling with, that I do need to finish. Otherwise, I'll be up all night, insomnia, stressed out, and worried about the next day. But if I'm excited, I want to leave it just before it's done. And it makes a huge difference. I mean, just try that with something that you're loving and just stop yourself short. And you will wake up in the morning like, oh, this is cool. I'm excited to finish it. But for me, it has to be in that brain space. It can't have any negative stressors. Otherwise, it will do the opposite. But it's a good tip. I mean, I've used that all the time.
It's funny how subconscious that is. I mean, I was looking at pieces that are right next to me, and that, like, just even yesterday, I left a couple of pieces sort of in a really good spot so I can just come into the studio and just start cranking. And that's what I did very first thing this morning, is I just immediately picked up a brush and started painting. Didn't even check my email, didn't do anything, because I had a really easy spot to be able to start. That's weird.
Yeah. All right.
I was gonna say one more thing with this, and this is super short. Especially with all of the analysis paralysis that I think we get into, and with all the struggles that I think we've all identified, I think the one thing that we always have to remind ourselves is just how capable we are, and that we have done all of these things before. But some days it feels like we've never done them before, or it's too hard, or it just simply can't happen. But we've already done all of these things. We've made art, we've kept a schedule, we've gone to the bank, we've fed ourselves, we've showered, we've done all of these things. So I think it's just often we have to remind ourselves that we just can. In the absence of whatever. So
yeah, you can. And I mean, there's always going to be that voice. Well, now Fred's been discussed, so let's call it George. There's always going to be a George who is always wanting to tell you that you're not going to be able to do this. Someone else can do it better, or you're not going to be able to get this done. Well, George needs to be put in his place. And in the morning, I have done something that was from 20 years ago. I'm sure you both know of that Artist's Way book that was huge a long time ago. Sometimes I go and revisit it when it's needed. And it was needed not that long ago. So I've gotten back into that practice. And it's just basically waking up in the morning and without thinking, just letting George come out. Give George his space. Let's let him vent all he wants in this journal for a page and a half, and then put it away. And that really does help to kind of like those things, that space is going to exist. George is going to be there to constantly try to question you and try to make you feel a little bit not sure about where you are with things. Then just give him his space to be able to do that ranting, but do it in a little journal over a page or two, and then get on with your day. And that mentally really does help. That's another little tip and trick.
Like it. I only have one left. How are you guys on tips?
I'm good. I've said what I've needed to say.
I mean, I'm sure things will pop up as you talk, but I'm good.
My last one is.
Do you have like the Churchill? Like what other named
Milli
tip do
Vanilli.
you have?
This one's called the
Vanilli
pizza. It's called the pizza approach. So let me ask you guys this scenario. You've got a nice hot pizza. It's cut in beautiful slices. You pull out a slice, you eat it, great. Pull out another slice, you eat it, oh, it's good. Go for a third slice, something happens, it slips, it falls on the ground, like right in where the dog eats or whatever. There's no salvaging that slice of pizza. And then you grab the rest of the pizza that's on the counter and you crumple the whole box up and put it in the garbage, right? no one ever does that. You don't throw away a perfectly good pizza because you dropped one slice on the ground. And yet we do this all the time with our day. So I will be cooking along, doing great. All of a sudden, I'll get distracted. A kid will need something. I'll have to do this over here, and I look and like I just spent an hour spinning wheels, not really doing anything, and I'll think, well, shoot, the day's shot.
Yep.
There's no recovering from this day.
Yep.
I'm just gonna throw in the towel and call it quits. That's throwing the pizza away. And one of the things I've been trying to think is, you know what, that hour was shot, but the day isn't shot. So
But it
let's
wasn't
reset.
shot because you just shifted your focus to some other task that was necessary to take care of.
Okay, but let's say it wasn't necessary. Let's say you did spend an hour watching YouTube videos.
Okay, well, that's
Right.
better. Okay.
which that happens too sometimes.
Yeah, that happens.
So essentially what I've been trying to do to train myself is think of it as that hour was shot, but the day is still good and the day is still salvageable and there's still good slices of pizza on the counter. You shouldn't
Yep.
throw those away as well. And so what you do is you reset. You kind of go, for me, I'll kind of do the same thing I do at the beginning of the day, where get a drink, get a cold drink, do some push-ups to get my blood flowing, or squats or whatever, and look at my calendar and check things off or write things down and just treat it as I'm starting my day over again. Here we go. And then boom, I'm back into productivity
Yeah.
time.
I think it's just that idea of cognitive flexibility and
Mhm.
knowing that I don't think it's realistic that every single day you're going to meet every task head on and you're going to have, just because you wrote down, things are going to happen, distractions are going to happen, you're human, and it's okay. You're going to have A level days, B level days, C level energy days. And
Yeah.
it's just the nature of our brains. So
That reminds me, there's an athlete that was being interviewed. I think she's a runner, and it was on the Rick Roll YouTube channel or podcast, whatever it is. And Rick Roll interviews athletes a lot. And she said something profound that applies to training and doing, any sort of athletic thing. But I think it applies also to us as creative people making things. And she said that your workouts should fall under these three things. 1/3 of the time, your workouts should be super good and feel great, and you're like doing you're hitting strides that you don't normally hit. 1/3 of the time, your workout should be middle of the road, like I showed up today and I did it and I knocked the workout out, but I didn't really hit any goals or any strides. And 1/3 of the time, your workout should be absolute trash and they feel horrible and you didn't want to do it, but you still did it and you did it poorly at it. And she said, if it's evenly divided between those third times, you are going in the right direction. As soon as your workouts lean to where half the time they're awesome and you're doing really good and you're feeling really great, maybe you're not pushing yourself hard enough. And if the other half of the time you're doing horribly and it's just too hard and your motivation's not there, maybe you're pushing yourself way too hard. And so I think if that applies to us as creatives, like you were saying, you have A days, B days, and C days. Like if it's a nice even spread of those, maybe you're right in that lane where you should be in, and you're not pushing you're pushing yourself just the right amount, and things are good. But as soon as you have a month where it's like, or a week where it's like too hard, yeah, you maybe have too much on your plate. You may be trying to take on more than your abilities are at, And then if you're like, man, this week all I did was draw cavemen, because I love drawing. Why did I say cavemen? Let's say you love drawing cavemen, and that's all you drew for a week. You didn't push yourself, but you had fun with it. And maybe you aren't pushing yourself hard enough. You need to throw in some spacemen or something.
Some cave women.
Yeah, cave women.
some video game machines.
Cave people can be Right, video game machines. Anyways, so anything to add to these tips? We cover it all.
This is good. This section felt good.
This is good.
Yeah.
This was a good start. Like, I don't think we've covered it all. I think there's so much to cover. And
I think
what
it is.
happens is within literally 2 seconds of us leaving the podcast, I'm going to have ding, 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 ding in my brain of, I should have said this. Oh, I've got this. So, but
what
I
the
do
YouTube
think we
comments
covered
are
a
for.
great amount today, but it's a topic that I think you could talk
Yeah.
nonstop about. I mean,
And I think in the YouTube comments, put in your best and favorite productivity, either hack or tip,
Mhm.
things that work for you, what your coping mechanisms are. And I think that'll be some really good discussion in there too.
If you made it this far, put that in there and add the particular. I think it's a checked box emoji. Is what you want to put in there.
or a tomato for the Pomodoro method.
There you go. Tomato would be good too. One of those two. Unless you have an emoji you want to add, Anthony.
Nope. No, I think I think we're all overwhelmed, and you just put tomatoes and timers and checks and things like that. So no, I'm going to say no.
Maybe
I'm setting a
stopwatch
boundary, Jake.
All right. Did you guys want to answer my one question,
Yeah.
or give me advice, and then we'll
I'm
call it good?
scared.
Or-
I don't know what the question is yet. So,
Okay, so that's to do with my newsletter.
okay.
And we were talking before about Anthony was saying something weird where he'll get my newsletter but it'll say it's from someone else. And it's
Yeah.
because the service I use is ConvertKit, and a lot of newsletters use ConvertKit, and so there might be something there where wires get crossed or something. However, I recently left ConvertKit and switched to Substack. And the reasons for that was ConvertKit, my needs for a newsletter and what ConvertKit offers overlap small. There's like a small overlap, but I was paying for all the things that I didn't really need to use. And ConvertKit's great for if you really want to have a dialed in business where you are putting people into like email sequences where it's like, hey, welcome to my email list. And now they're on, they're getting every week pre-written email, and you can run them through and you can do all this like fancy stuff. So someone can be on an email sequence that you've pre-written, and then you can fold them into your regular email sequence that you're doing. This is great for like sales. Like, hey, I'm offering a service, I'm teaching you about it, and now I'm in this sales mechanism now where I want you to, buy my book or buy my course or something like that. It's great. I just wasn't using that, but I was paying for it, and I realized Substack had things that I really wanted that ConvertKit didn't do, and that was the community aspect to it. So you post an email, and then people can, if they're logged into Substack, they can go and comment under that email. And there's conversation that happens there. And I've seen this on other newsletters that I follow. You can, at the bare minimum, like it, but then you can comment on it. And then if you really like it, you can, and you have an account with Substack, you can, what they call restack, which is sort of sharing that to your people, what you just posted. And so I shifted over there, and I'm like, this is great. It's free. And I can't do all the bells and whistles, but I can send out an email whenever I want to, which is cool. So that's where I'm at. But what I noticed is when you shift to Substack, it really is like dialed into being like, it's sort of this mix of I'm sending out newsletters, but I also have like this presence on Substack where here's my blog, or it's sort of like, here's my blog, even though they're newsletters, or here's the articles that I write. Here's my little space. This is who I am. This is about me. This is a collection of topics that I've written about. So you can divide it into different topics. So if I took all of the emails that I've written about dinosaurs, there could be a dinosaur thread, where you could just read all the dinosaur ones. Or if I do all the ones about where I'm talking about artwork that I made, there could be the artwork section. And one thing that I've noticed is everybody has a name for their Substack. So it could be as simple as From the Desk of Jake Parker. And with ConvertKit, it's Jake Parker's newsletter, whatever. But I feel this pressure, and I feel like I need to sort of formalize this newsletter that I've been doing for 5 years as a particular, almost like a publication. I want to treat it that way, where you're not just getting a newsletter, but you're getting a National Geographic in the mail every month, or you're getting a Muppet magazine in the mail every month. And I toyed around last year with naming it some obscure inside joke name that sounds cool, but doesn't really say anything. I remember bouncing it off of you, Anthony. I was going to call it Terminal 44.
Yeah.
And it sounds cool, but what does it mean? Nobody knows what that means.
Right.
And
Yeah. I
what
don't
I'm
know. I
seeing-
think I'm more of the simple, just Jake Parker. It's just you're Jake
Yeah,
Parker.
the Jake Parker
I don't know.
newsletter. Well, something hit me because I was thinking about, well, what do I talk about a lot that also overlaps with what I'm doing as a newsletter? And one of my sort of core creative principles is filling your creative bank account. And I talk a lot about how you need to have experiences, both indirect and direct experiences in life. You need to go to the library and see things, right? And that's sort of like indirect experience, see things through the eyes of other people, but you also need to walk through your city and pay attention to the people in it and experience stuff in person that is not through the lens of someone else. And that's all filling your creative bank account. And every week when I share my newsletter, I am sort of like either sharing something I've done or sharing cool stuff that other people have made or interesting things that other people are doing. And I've always looked at it as like, I'm filling my creative bank account. This is me filling my creative bank account, but also recording it. And so it dawned on me that maybe I shouldn't change the name of my newsletter to something like the creative bank account. But that's what I wanted to bounce off of you guys. Am I so deep into my head at this point that it just sounds like sort of creative navel gazing, or am I onto something?
That's a tough one. I think personally, I don't know. I think I'm worried that you're overthinking it, maybe, and maybe creating this identity that is going to restrict you. And eventually, I think it's through your sharing of what you've been doing. Like, I think when I see your newsletters and it's showing what your work you've been up to, and then you'll say, look at these amazing 1970s vehicles I discovered on Flickr, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I'm seeing things that are really kind of interesting to you, and it sparks an interest in me wanting to go and start exploring, whether it's that site where you found these really cool architectural hubs. Like, you're always sharing these architectural gems and these vehicles, but it's still getting me excited to want to start doing it. I mean, even I would respond to these newsletters and go, I need to be doing more of that. Like, that's really cool. I'll go and look and see where. So in a way, you're still doing that through your own way of looking at and how you do it. My worry is if you create almost this brand, so to speak, of how to instill, that's, I don't know. I think it almost would become more stressful and in the moment versus having a little bit of that organic being, just sharing with others your experience and how you're filling your creative tank. And people are smart. They'll kind of use that as a tool. I mean, I think there's both. I think, I don't know. That's a tough one because I can see the other thing too. So I don't know, Anthony, stop my rambling.
No. I like it when you ramble. I see both sides of this.
I see both.
And I think just knowing the kind of nerd you are, and like something like National Geographic is that, it's that catch-all for very interesting worldly stuff. Obviously I get a sense of like, you want your newsletter to feel like that to a degree. Like, you really could probably, like the way that this stuff works, like, I mean, this would be a really fun publication So I understand it. I think from Sam's standpoint, simplifying it because you're the brand. Jake Parker's the brand. Like I think on your Substack right now, it's called the Space Cave.
Yeah, that was when I made I do this thing where, hey, there's a new thing everybody's doing. You need to go get on there. And I'll just sort of stake my flag in the ground. And so I made my Substack like years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I just called it the Space Cave because I'm like, it needs a name. Oh, they need a name? Okay, it's Space Cave, and moved on with my life. And now that I've shifted back, I'm like, oh, shoot, that's not what I want to call it. Like,
Yep. I think if it's a tool for you to grow your personal brand, identifying it as Jake Parker, your name, easily identifiable, I think that's important. I think if you want to partition a space in your life where you can have these side interests, these other things that you aggregate, because you also highlight other artists. Like I saw last week, you highlighted Reagan Lodge, who I know from the Twitch space, but from comics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Then I think you're allowed to let it be another thing. I think the more complicated the name is, the harder it's going to be for people to find.
Yeah.
And then you just have to make the choice if you want people to find it.
And you know what? And it's also, as we're talking through this, it's also, I'm just thinking, okay, so what if this is something that's this next area and chapter where you want to grow and and maybe you're holding on to the Jake Parker aspect because it's the comfort and the known, and it's scary to leave that and venture into this new thing that's maybe like the creativity project kind of thing, and it's its whole own there. I mean, I think I can't answer that as much as you kind of what's fueling you and what's giving you a little bit, but just as long as you're not holding on to the Jake Parker stuff just because it's comfortable and you know it and you're scared of this, like leaving this identity in that moment but maybe that's because you're recognizing that you're growing into something new and you want to try something different. You can always try it. I mean,
I've found though that when I'm on, like when I've been messing around with Substack and looking for other Substacks to like follow so I can kind of understand the culture here and everything, when like Kyle Webster, his email is called the Accidental Expert. It's a great name. And all of his emails are like, here's something I learned from my 30 years of being a creative person and how it applies to you, right? And I could go there and be like, oh, Accidental Expert, and this is going to be advice for creatives, right? And it's from Kyle Webster. Okay, that's kind of cool. I get what's happening
that's true.
here. If it was just Kyle Webster's newsletter, I'd be like, I follow him on Twitter. I don't need to know what he's going to be sharing with me every week, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So what I sort of like, what's the curbside stop and turn and look at that particular thing instead of just moving forward? I don't do, I know I've built somewhat of a following over the years, but there's still every year a generation of creative people who come online who have no idea who Jake Parker is. And so one of my thinking is, you name this thing something that describes it by itself on its own from Jake Parker versus
that's good. That's okay.
Jake's
I think you're
newsletter,
kind of
a creative bank account for people.
a creative bank account with Jake Parker or something.
Yeah,
I think
something like
that's
that.
where we're
That's what I would
brainstorming in
do.
public now.
So we're big fans of Colin and Samir. Like we really like the way that they analyze YouTube and YouTube culture and that sort of thing. And I think their YouTube channel is called Colin and Samir, right?
Right. Yeah.
But their newsletter is called The Published Press, which is, I think, the most generic newsletter name of all time. And a lot of times when it comes through into my inbox, I disregard it, even though I know that there's really good value inside of here. And it's just because I don't associate that with them at all. But I will watch a lot of Colin and Samir videos. Yeah. So I like the aspect of merging sort of that name with you and your name. I think ultimately, we're independent people who sometimes take contracts and things from big companies. but those big companies come and go, and I do think that there has to be some way that you continue to build your own personal brand if you want people to
Yeah.
follow, purchase, support, watch, and things like that. And the more that you delineate all of these things, it could struggle. But again, I also recognize that sometimes you need to bucket a thing to be able to put it in its place on the shelf,
Mhm.
just so you can feel comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, even just like, I think I'm mirroring you in a lot of ways in terms of I've been wanting to create some kind of, whether it's through what Anthony mentioned, Circle or Patreon, but I feel like I'm in this stage of life where I'm wanting to take more of a mentorship role or
Mhm.
offer my own experiences. And it's almost becoming the art, like I'm a drawing, but it's like the mentorship part is starting to get bigger
Yeah.
than the practice of the actual drawing and the creating work. I'm finding myself like wanting to create things to share or offer experiences. And that's why I'm loving even like this platform has been just feeding me in a way that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is something I'm really loving doing. And I've been
Uh-huh.
contemplating, I really want to start some kind of place where I can offer, but then I start to get in my head where it's exactly what I don't know how to define it. And
Mhm.
I'm going back and forth with how do I define this as something that people would want to come and
Right.
take from and get inspired by, and without pigeonholing it to something that I lose interest in a bit. There's something there, but I'm not sure
Mhm.
how to go about it. And it feels a little bit similar to what Jake is saying.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
So with one of my products, the Chaotic Draw Along, which was forged out of a live stream event that we've been doing for 2 years, when we were putting together and this is a product versus a newsletter, so it's a little bit different. But when we were putting together the all of the logo design for the physical object that we would be selling, there was a big conversation if we put Anthony Wheeler's Chaotic Draw Along or if we
Right.
just have the Chaotic Draw Along. Ultimately, the conclusion that I came to is that while I love having my name on it,
Mhm.
I don't think that that is necessarily important.
Right.
And that this is a product and a brand that can far outweigh what I can do. And I think that's already even proven itself out. And so like my name is on the back of it.
Mhm.
And I think in the next iteration, my name is off that thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
And it's just, it's irrelevant that I'm the guy that made it.
Right.
And so, but
yeah.
that's an evolution of that though, too.
I think we're kind of
Right.
figuring this out as we're talking with you on the podcast, because now my brain is going to, this is something that's almost like this movement kind of thing that you're using to inspire others and
Mhm.
it's almost becoming kind of like my neighbor had started and created the Happiness Project, which is now in all these schools everywhere. And it's an incredible
Mm.
program. And people think of it as, they know what this is, the Happiness Project, and I'm kind of seeing you going there as we're talking. So ignore what I said in the beginning, but this creativity thing and then it's becoming a movement in itself and a place for, I don't know, there's something there because you have a lot to get. And just even from that workshop I did with you,
Mhm.
it's just oozes out of you. So
Yeah.
you need to
Yeah.
address
I
that.
recommended that cream, dude, for all that oozing issue. You're supposed to be putting it on 3 times a day.
Oh,
No?
are we talking
Well,
Oh.
about the
the
fear I
dermatologist
ooze
said I
or what are we
could
talking
ease
about?
back on that, ease off on that. Um,
Because I do ooze fear. Uh,
no, you guys give me a lot to think about here, and I realize, yeah, I realize things that serve other people are way more successful than things that serve me. And that's why I shifted my newsletter early on from, hey, here's what I'm working on, to here's all the cool stuff that I find creative, and here's a cool artist you need to learn about. Oh, and here's what I'm working on as well. I'll lead with what I'm working on, but then everything I'm trying to share is here's how this creative individual is absorbing this and might use it to fuel their creativity in the future.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's great. They're great.
okay, well, thanks for your thoughts on that.
I look forward to next week getting your Substack, and it's Terminal 44, the name that your wife rejected, and we can talk about it on the podcast again.
Oh man, my wife and daughter shot that one down quick.
But you and I thought it was the coolest name. We're like, this is rad.
I know. They're like, Terminal 44. Who do you think you are? Big eye roll.
I think I side with her on that one.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a name for a zine that 5 people buy.
So real quick, I know we need to go, but if there was a new creative starting right now, would you recommend that they brand themselves as themselves or brand themselves under a moniker or another name?
Well, that's a great question. I would brand yourself as whatever name is going to be on the cover of the book projects that you're doing, or in the credits of the films that you're making, or whatever. Because you don't want to brand yourself at, this is my story. I was branded as Agent 44 online for a decade, and then I started getting into publishing in a major way, and I realized, the cover of Missile Mouse is not going to say by Agent 44. It's going to say by Jake Parker.
God, that would have been cool, though.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
So I'm like, who here, who outside of these 10,000 online people that sort of we cross paths with each other out of the millions of people, who actually knows my name, right? And so I shifted from, I had agent44.com. I still own that domain, but I went and bought mrjakeparker.com because Jake Parker was taken. So I had to get Mr. Jake Parker. And that's where, and then my social handles switched from Agent 44 to Jake Parker. So my advice would be just be consistent. So, if your name is Anthony Arts or Sam Arts online, maybe you can get away with your books being called, Anthony, or, the credit being Anthony Wheeler. But if it's, if your name online is, Dragon Scales 516 or whatever, that's, you might want to switch your name to, or switch your handle to your actual name.
Yeah, good idea.
But also, if you're going back to like starting a newsletter or starting some sort of website or something like that, whether it's on Medium or Substack or a YouTube channel or anything like that, if you come at it with who's the ideal person that this serves and how do I best serve them, the whole branding and everything could be leaning towards that, but you could have your name be a part of it. And I think of like Kelsey Rodriguez, who, it is Kelsey Rodriguez's YouTube channel, but she is specifically there to help young artists make a living as artists. And it says that on the top of everything. It says every video you see is leaning that way. And she is obviously it's promoted her work and her stuff as an artist, but she's actively trying to serve people. And every video is here. How can I help you? And I think that's the path forward online. If you're wanting to, I think, really sort of make inroads with people online right now. We live in an information age, and so people don't necessarily need any more information, but what they do need is sort of help, being guided along their path. And you could be that person, and they need a friend, and you could be that. You show up sort of like Anthony does every day with his thing, but then you get down to this path where at the end of 10 years, what do you have wanted to have accomplished? And you can only spread your time out to so many things.
Yeah.
And, if one of your big bucket goals is, I want to have a very thriving, active community who loves and supports each other, then leaning into those things is important for you. But if your other goal or your main goal is I want to have a library of work that I've created that people can read and share with each other, then you're going to have to dial way back on the community thing to focus on the work. So it's a big toss up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. Who asked that question? You got me on a little soapbox there.
I don't know.
It was who should you use your name or not?
Oh, that
If
yeah,
you're
that, no,
starting
that
out.
was, yeah, I was just asking.
Okay,
that.
good.
One
All
of my
right.
one of my friends and I are having that conversation right now about her brand, her moniker, and using her real name versus not. And how do you then? And this is the conversation that I'm having with her. And there's not one size fits all. But it's like, how do you take something that people have known you for years and years, and then shift it to another thing that you think is more encompassing of what your overall aura or brand is? And
They'll find
and what's
you.
the fallout?
They'll find you
Yeah.
because like I
Yeah.
was Mummy Sam for years. That's where I would give talks at the Etsy headquarters. I was doing all like had a big blog, and that was kind of my brand, so to speak. And then I kind of grew and went into illustration and picture books, and that was weird because people just knew me as Mummy Sam. They didn't know my name. And then all of a sudden with the first book out, I'm like, well, I can't put Mummy Sam as the name because a lot of people don't know who that is. So I just had to switch to Samantha Cotterill is what I did, which is not my married name. It's my maiden name. But I had already established myself as a painter with that name, so I kept it. But the people that were part of Mummy Sam found me. It's not hard to find. If you switch over, people will see that you've become this new kind. So it's not as hard as you think it's going to be.
Yeah, what's fun is people will be like, "I knew you in the age of 44 days."
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like hey, I knew you.
Yeah. I knew you in the Mummy Sam days.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was your first handle, Anthony?
It was Wheels 9696, and the 9696 was my operator number at the Hy-Vee grocery store that I worked at, and that was just it. Nothing more.
That's cool.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna wrap it up here.
Cool.
Thank you for joining us, everybody. 3-Point Perspective is made possible by SVSLearn, where becoming a great illustrator starts. Your hosts today were Samantha Cotterill, Anthony Wheeler. I'm Jake Parker. And our shout out to all of our SVS people who helped make this possible. Podcast produced by Daniel Tu. That's Daniel T.U. Our team manager, Preston Smith. Our keeper of the curriculum, Austin Shirtliff. Our show notes wrangler, Lily Howell. Our chief operations officer, Lisa Fott. And our illustrator, Annalise Black. Now, go draw something.